After I made my video, a few people asked me, okay, we heard the questions. We want to know the answers, Jesse. Answer the questions. Good afternoon. I did a video a little while ago about what my students really want to know. I had them ask me questions. What do they really want to know from an American? Questions ranged from what exactly is the American spirit? Is America really so dangerous with all those guns? To, I think my personal favorite, are Americans' stomachs okay? They drink cold water. After I made my video, a few people asked me, okay, we heard the questions. We want to know the answers, Jesse. Answer the questions. And so that's what I'm going to do today. I'm going to answer the questions. But first, a little nourishment. I should probably say that I'm no expert in American history. I'm an expert in teaching English to speakers of foreign languages, and I'm an expert in the NBA, having covered the league for more than 10 years and working as PR director for the Clippers long time ago. And I guess I also can say I'm an expert at being an American living in China. And so, while my opinions don't add up to a hill of beans, they are mine. Caveats out of the way, let's get started. Do all Americans have stomach problems because they drink cold water? Well, to my knowledge, no. As far as I know, well, let me put it this way. I have never heard of stomach problems being a particular American problem. But to the larger question, traditional Chinese medicine tells them that hot water, warm water is better for you. It definitely increases blood circulation, and it has other health benefits. As to why Americans drink cold water, it could be just cultural, but I dug a little deeper. One reason is that as a country, we developed faster than most. We had electrification and water filtration all through the country, roughly 100 years ago. And so we had clean water. We didn't have to worry so much about water problems, water poisoning. And we had refrigeration, so we could actually cool it, and that got into our culture. So that covers water. Now, what about coffee? One of my students asked, why do Americans prefer coffee to tea? And that is really interesting and goes to American history. Americans know about the Boston Tea Party in 1773, a revolt against England and its high taxes without representation, and it was a precursor to the Revolution. But what I didn't know until I was asked this question is that John Adams, who became the second president of the United States, he exhorted everybody in America not to drink tea and to drink coffee. Interesting. Having mentioned the Revolutionary War, that's a good segue into, this really big question about American spirit, American character, why we're so individual. And as a teacher, it's always like a puzzle. You have limited time, and you try to figure out the best way to get information into your students' gut in this limited amount of time. What I decided to do was focus on 3 amendments of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. This was after going through a brief history of our Revolutionary War, our Declaration of Independence, and the forming of our country. I talked about the First, the Second, and the Fourth Amendment. The first, of course, is the 5 freedoms, to put it in a Chinese way of speaking. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to peacefully assemble, and freedom to petition the government for grievances. In other words, the last two, to protest. A lot of the questions had to do with guns. Why are we so violent? Why does everybody have a gun? If I go there to study, am I going to get killed? So I talked about the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. And finally, I talked about the Fourth Amendment, that the state cannot come into our house without a court order. We are able to live a free, private life unless the government has a serious reason to invade it. And I told them that those three amendments, as much as anything, reflect our independence and our individualism. And I wanted to get across the point in a larger context that America is an idea as opposed to a nationality. And that's really all I wanted to say about that. It's hard to get the history of the United States into 1 hour. And, I stretched it into 2 and still didn't scratch the surface of scratching the surface. And then starting next week, I'm going to get into the really important stuff, food and lifestyle. Which brings me to another of my favorite questions. This one was a long one, and I will paraphrase. Why don't Americans save their money? Why do they do things like I've seen in Friends, the TV series Friends, where Chandler and Monica spent all their money on a wedding? What if they have a problem in the future and don't have any money? What do they do? I guess the first thing I'm going to do is tell them about my wedding to Summer. That's when we drove to Las Vegas, just the two of us. We stayed in a hotel for 2 nights. We got married in a drive-through, the Little White Chapel, and that was that. We did not spend all our savings. Lots of questions about the education system, and particularly, is it true that student life in America is really easy, that we have it much harder? And that I can tell them confidently, yeah, it's true. However, I'm also going to tell them that we don't have a centralized system like in China. We have a very localized system. And there are very good public schools and very, not good public schools. And it creates a social imbalance, a class imbalance. It is a huge problem, not a good thing. I will lay it out for them best I can. Back to the food. Do Americans really eat burgers as their staple food? And are their diets really so unhealthy? I'm going to tell them if we did a survey of male American college students, I'm sure you would find a high percentage who eat burgers on a regular basis. But around the country and in other age groups, yeah, I wouldn't say that. But I would say an unhealthy diet. I checked it out. And America, it's not the first, it's not the 20th, I think, but it is the first major country, the first major population country in terms of obesity. First day of class, I asked my students about Eileen Gu, the gold medal skier who was born and raised in America, but skied for China at the Olympics this year. I wanted my students to start thinking about identity. And these past few weeks, I've been telling stories to kind of flesh it out. I think that any American living in a foreign country will tell you this, that if you want to know how American you are, go live in another country. If I meet up with an American, there's this instant connection. You know, when you think of America these days, you think of it splintered and broken up and just divided in every which way. But if I meet an American here, you know, we have a connection and we know how to talk to each other. I remember when I first came to China, that was, you know, back in the medieval age. And this was pre-social media. And there were a collection of Americans, also some Australians and a couple English and, you know, other nationalities. But, you know, we Americans, we had some kind of a bond. And I know, you know, looking back and knowing them, that in today's environment, we might be politically diametrically opposed to each other in a lot of ways. But we all got along great because of this, you know, that we were Americans in a foreign country. One of my friends back then, he was ethnically Chinese. His parents were born in China, but he was born in the Bay Area, in San Francisco Bay Area. He told me that he was raised without knowing practically anything about his Chinese heritage. He's probably about 50 now, and I think that was fairly common during that age for people who came to America, parents who wanted to raise their children as Americans. It's much different today, I'm sure, for not just Chinese who immigrate to America, but for you know, people from all over the world. There's more of a recognition of keeping the heritage, the culture from the country that your grandparents, parents, ancestors came from. But to continue with that idea of that that bond that we have as Americans, that indescribable bond, I remember many afternoons sitting around small tables, drinking big beers, just, you know, shooting the shit, making bar bets like, did the band say, get a load off Annie or get a load off Fanny? And, you know, we could trade movie quotes and TV quotes, and it was just very natural and something that only people from the same culture can share. Anyway, so many great questions. I haven't scratched the surface. I hope I've answered some of the questions that you guys were interested in. And I think I'm going to stop here because, well, I like to keep my videos relatively short. So I want to thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have a comment or another question, please drop one below. Press the like button. And if you thought this video was interesting, please share it. Sharing is caring. Last thing, please subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. Thanks. Catch you later.